Right next to the well, an old local man lay motionless, his body covered in red dust. A trail of dried blood stretched from his waist down to the ground. His thin arm was reaching out, as if he had tried to crawl there for a drink of water. Elias tightened his grip on the bucket handle, his eyes scanning the yard. Silent, not a soul in sight. Only the sound of wind whistling through the broken fence. He stepped forward and knelt down. The old man's skin was burning hot, his breath shallow and irregular. His cloudy eyes cracked open, letting out a raspy whisper. Elias asked no questions. He unstrapped the canteen from his belt and slowly poured water onto the old man's lips. He stood up and dragged the man into the shade under the eaves. Pulling out an old dagger, he sliced open the shirt around the wound. Elias washed it clean with well water and wrapped it temporarily using torn strips from an old shirt. Once he was done, he leaned against a wooden pillar and lit a cigarette. Smoke curled upward, mixing with the old man's labored breathing. Elias knew this would bring trouble to the farm. But looking at the man lying still by the well, he just could not let him die like some abandoned animal. The late afternoon sunlight was beginning to soften. A breeze swept through, carrying the scent of dry earth, and Elias could feel it clearly. The long-standing silence of the farm had just been broken. 2 days later, just as the sun was rising, Elias stepped out into the yard and realized the old man was gone. No sound of footsteps, no trace left behind except for a trail of dry soil stretching out toward the fields. He had left as quietly as he came. Elias leaned against the porch pillar and spat out the cigarette butt. "All right then," he muttered. "At least he's alive." He turned toward the barn to check on the cattle, ready for another ordinary day. But by midday, the sound of hooves echoed from afar. Elias frowned, grabbed his Winchester rifle, and walked toward the gate. Through the haze of red dust, 6 figures emerged, 6 Apache women on horseback. They stopped just outside the fence, each one tall and strong, muscles taut beneath sun-darkened skin. The one in front, Sila, dismounted. She stood tall, her deep black eyes fixed on Elias. "You saved Elder Nahuel," she said, her voice low and commanding. "We are here to serve and repay our debt." Before Elias could respond, they all got off their horses. Nara led the horses to the well and began drawing water. Luma rolled up her sleeves and started gathering the dry hay. Taya pulled the chain to close the gate. Wika and Anya headed straight to the fence line, inspecting each wooden post. Elias stood frozen, the rifle still in his hand. "Hold on," he barked, but they ignored him. By noon, a pot of steaming stew was sitting in the middle of the yard. Elias watched as the 6 women sat around the fire, eating and chatting in Apache, as if this was their home. He tapped the barrel of his rifle against the wooden post. "I did not invite anyone here." Sila looked up, her gaze sharp as a blade. "And you are not sending us away. You saved the soul of the tribe. Now the tribe gives back. Through our service." Elias clenched his jaw. A part of him wanted to send them all packing, but as he looked around, the fence now straighter, the horse stable clean, and the yard quieter than it had ever been, he just grunted and turned away. That night, the 6 women lit a campfire out in the yard. Their husky voices sang into the night, mingling with the sound of insects. Elias sat on the porch, his back resting against the wooden pillar, the tip of his cigarette glowing red. For the first time in many years, the ranch was no longer completely silent. The next morning, Elias woke up to the sound of loud hammering out in the yard. He opened the door and saw Nara hanging a saddle on a freshly built rack, while Taya was splitting firewood right in the middle of the yard with an axe. "What the hell are you doing?" Elias barked. Sila did not even look up, still working on rebuilding the fence. "We are fixing what you have neglected." Elias bit down on his cigarette and said nothing. He knew they were not going to listen to him anyway. All day, the 6 women worked without rest. Luma was clearing weeds around the garden. Wika inspected the trail that led into the ranch. Anya climbed down into the well and scrubbed away the moss and algae. By midday, when Elias brought the cattle back, he found the barn swept clean, the water troughs filled, and the hay stacked neatly. Even the barn roof had been patched to keep the wind out. He stood for a moment, hands on his hips. The ranch had not been this orderly since his wife and child were gone. That evening, the 6 women built a large fire. Venison sizzled on skewers, and the rich smell filled the yard. Elias sat on the porch, trying to ignore it. but his stomach was already growling. Anya walked over and placed a piece of meat on a wooden slab beside him. "Eat," she said plainly. Elias stared at it, but in the end, he took it. "You are not my boss." Anya just shrugged. "Of course not." Her answer left Elias speechless, though the corner of his mouth twitched upward ever so slightly. That night, soft laughter echoed from the fire. Wicca was telling a story in her native tongue, and the others giggled quietly. Elias lay in bed, listening to the sound drifting through the window. It had been a long time since laughter was heard on the ranch. The next morning, when Elias walked out into the yard, he saw a homemade mousetrap placed right by the hay storage. "Who made this?" "Wicca," Selah replied. "Your storage will not have mice anymore." Elias scratched his chin and said nothing. He only realized he had stopped snapping at them. The ranch no longer felt empty. It was coming back to life, in a way he never expected. Rumors spread like dry fire. Within just a few days, the entire town of Cinderbrush was whispering about how Elias Ward is keeping 6 Apache women on his land. One afternoon, with the sun still hanging in the sky, the thunder of hooves echoed in the distance. Elias was tying a rope when 4 riders came through the gate. Leading them was Hank Dobbs, the saloon owner, known for stirring up trouble. Hank pulled his horse to a stop, glancing around the yard like he was inspecting property that belonged to him. "Ward," he drawled, "the town does not like the sight of you harboring 6 squaws out here. It is stirring up problems. You ought to clear them out before trouble finds you." Elias stood upright, one hand resting casually on the grip of his rifle. "This is my land. Who works here is my business." Hank spat on the ground and let out a dry laugh. "It is not just your business. Folks do not want them around. They bring trouble." Before Elias could reply, Selah stepped out from the stable. Her shadow stretched long across the ground, her muscles glistening with sweat. Behind her, Nara, Taya, Luma, Wicca, and Anya emerged one by one, forming a line. No one spoke, but their eyes sliced through the riders like blades. The air turned heavy. Only the wind and the quiet snorts of the horses filled the silence. "You are bringing trouble on yourself, Ward," Hank said, his gaze flicking to the 6 women. "When they turn on you, you will not have time to regret it." Elias lifted the Winchester off his shoulder, not pointing it, but holding it firmly across his chest. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Anyone takes one more step past that fence, they are not walking back out." Hank stared at him for a long moment, then let out a dry chuckle. "Fine, but you will be hearing from us soon." The 4 riders turned their horses and galloped away, leaving a cloud of red dust behind. Elias lowered the rifle and looked back at the 6 women. Selah gave him a single nod, a silent thank you. That evening, they worked quietly, but something in the air had changed. This was no longer about repaying a debt. Now, they stood together in the face of a real threat. "I am deeply grateful to have you here." If this story brought back old memories, dusty afternoons, the sound of hooves echoing in your chest, then subscribe to my channel, so that each day we can sit together once more, and I will tell you another tale from the West. The next night, the sky was pitch black, not a single star in sight. Elias was cleaning his rifle inside the cabin when the sharp smell of smoke suddenly hit his nose. He jumped up, shoved the door open, and ran out onto the porch. Flames were bursting from the hay storage on the east side of the yard. The bales of straw ignited like torches, casting a blazing red light across the entire ranch. "Nara!" Elias roared, grabbing a water bucket. Nara and Taya were already running toward the blaze before he even reached the shed. The 3 of them charged into the fire, dousing it with water. Taya shoveled dirt onto the burning hay, sending thick black smoke swirling into the air. Selah was leading the panicked cattle away, while Luma and Wicca passed buckets of water from the well in a steady rhythm. Anya climbed up onto the roof and tore down the burning torches still clinging to the rafters. Elias choked and coughed. Sweat and ash plastered across his face, but he did not stop. Finally, the fire died out, leaving only thick smoke and a smoldering, blackened pile of straw. They collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. Selah picked up a half-burned scrap of cloth from the dirt and held it up for Elias to see. It was a piece of shirt, marked with the symbol of the Dobbs gang. "This is a warning," Selah said, her voice low. Elias clenched his fists. "No, they want us gone." That very night, they began fortifying the ranch. Elias built a small watch post by the fence, and placed the Winchester rifle on it. Selah and Nara dug trenches around the hay storage to redirect water in case of fire. Luma hung tribal herb bundles around the yard. Part charm, part message to outsiders. This ranch is watched. By dawn, as the last tasks were finally done, Elias stood on the porch, watching the 6 women sitting around the fire. Their skin was streaked with soot, hair tangled and damp with sweat, but their eyes were bright with fire. The full moon rose high, casting a pale silver glow across the fields. Elias stood atop the watchpost, eyes sweeping over the newly reinforced fence. Down in the yard, the 6 women sat around a small fire, weapons within arm's reach. No one spoke. The silence was tight, like a bowstring drawn just before release. The sound of hoofbeats echoed steadily, then stopped just beyond the gate. 4 riders appeared under the moonlight, their shadows stretched long like ghosts. They did not charge in. They just watched. One of them, Hank Dobbs, let out a cold chuckle. "Ward," he shouted. "Last chance. Send them away, or we will burn your whole damn ranch." Elias raised his Winchester, the barrel catching the moonlight like polished steel. "If you set 1 foot past that fence, I will shoot." Selah stood beside the post, holding the revolver Elias had given her earlier that day. She fired a single shot into the air, the crack echoing through the valley. Hank's horse reared, neighing loudly. He clenched his jaw but did not advance. "We will be back," Hank growled. "Next time, it won't be a warning." The 4 riders turned and galloped away, leaving behind a strip of red cloth tied to the gate, a clear challenge. Elias climbed down, picked up the cloth, and threw it into the fire. The flames rose, swallowing it whole like a declaration of war. "Tomorrow, they will come back with more," Nara said, her eyes locked on the horizon. Elias nodded. "Then we will be ready." That night, they worked until nearly dawn, stacking sandbags at the doors, digging deeper trenches, and setting up wooden stakes as barriers. Wicca planted sharp spikes around the perimeter, while Anya sharpened blades until the steel gleamed under the moonlight. By first light, Elias stood in the middle of the yard, surveying the work. The ranch now looked like a small fortress, ready for a siege. He glanced at the 6 women, clothes streaked with mud, soaked in sweat. But no one complained. In their eyes, Elias saw something familiar. The look of people who had made up their minds not to back down. He smiled softly, for the first time in years, feeling that he was no longer alone. He realized they were no longer just those repaying a debt. They had become a part of this land. That night, the wind began to howl, carrying the scent of a sandstorm sweeping across the prairie. Elias sat alone in the cabin, his Winchester rifle resting across his knees. The fire had burned down to glowing embers. The door creaked open quietly. Selah stepped inside, her shadow stretching across the wooden floor. "You are not sleeping?" Elias shook his head. "I have been thinking. Tomorrow they will come back, maybe in greater numbers. I do not want any of you to die here." Selah crossed her arms, her eyes darkening. "You are telling us to leave?" "Yes." Elias stood, his voice low. "If you go before dawn, they will not have time to surround the place. I will hold them off on my own." A chair scraped behind him. Nara, Taya, and the others were already standing at the doorway. Taya's voice was sharp. "You think we are children? We have faced enemies before. We know how to fight." Elias looked around at the 6 faces, each one burning with fire. "I do not want to watch any of you die for this land." Selah stepped closer, now standing right in front of him. "Do you not get it, Ward? We are not going anywhere. This is already home." Silence. Only the wind whistling through the cracks in the door. At last, Elias sighed and set the Winchester down on the table. "Then tomorrow, we fight. But we work as a team. I do not give orders, and none of you leave me behind." Selah nodded. "A team," she said, and held out her hand. One by one, the others laid their hands atop hers. Nara, Luma, Wicca, Anya, and Taya. Finally, Elias placed his calloused hand on top. No more words were needed. In that moment, an unspoken pact was made. They would hold this land to the last drop of blood. The rest of the night passed in silence. They sat around the hearth, preparing bullets, sharpening blades, sipping water in measured swallows, each in their own corner, Yet their eyes met often across the flickering fire, no longer 6 strangers and 1 lonely rancher. At first light, Elias stepped out onto the porch, gazing across the misty field. For the first time in years, he felt he had a reason to defend this place, not just for the land, but for the ones who had chosen to stay. The next dawn blazed red, painting the entire field the color of blood. Elias stood atop the watchpost, his Winchester fully loaded. Down below, the 6 women were ready. Taya gripped a knife. Selah and Nara held rifles. Luma, Wika, and Anya stood armed with clubs and bows. No one said a word, the silence broken only by the flapping of the flag on the gate in the wind. The sound of hoofbeats rumbled like thunder. More than a dozen riders approached, kicking up a cloud of red dust. Hank Dobbs rode in front, smirking. "Ward, time to end this little game," he shouted. Elias did not answer. He raised the Winchester, bracing it tight against his shoulder. A warning shot rang out, the bullet slamming into a wooden post just inches from Hank's horse. "Fire!" Hank yelled, firing the first shot. Bullets ripped through the air, striking the window shields. Elias returned fire, knocking the hat clean off the rider next to Hank. At the same time, Selah fired her revolver, and Taya flung her dagger, cutting the reins of a horse that reared up in panic. Gun smoke filled the yard. Wika and Anya rushed from the side, swinging their clubs at the legs of a rider who had just jumped off his horse. He screamed and ran. After a few fierce minutes, the attackers began to falter. Hank cursed, turning his horse. "We will be back," he shouted. But the sound of galloping faded into the distance, leaving only dust and the sharp sting of gunpowder in the air. Elias lowered the Winchester, heart pounding. He looked back at the 6 women, hair tangled, faces streaked with sweat and soot, but their eyes burned with the fire of victory. "It is over," Elias said, his voice hoarse. That afternoon, the group worked together to repair the broken section of the fence, stacking new wooden stakes and filling the rebuilt shed with hay. Luma planted a row of corn in front of the porch, while Wika carved a tribal symbol into the gate, a bold declaration. This is home. As the sun dipped low, they sat on the porch steps, watching the horizon burn with the colors of sunset. Elias lit a cigarette, exhaling a long plume of smoke. "This ranch is no longer mine alone," he said. Selah sat beside him, her shoulders still dusted with dirt, and gave a quiet nod. "And no one is going to take it from us." The sunset cast its golden shadow over the 7 of them sitting side by side. For the first time, Elias felt that this land was truly a home, not just for him, but for a family built with blood, sweat, and the will to stand strong. True happiness in the West is not found in gold or land, but in the moment when hands meet after a long day, when you sit beneath a burning sky and know you are no longer alone. Love out here does not need promises. Just a shared look of understanding, a shared fence, a shared fight, and the quiet trust that tomorrow will come. Together, it has been an honor to ride with you, my dear friends of Wild West storytelling. I hope your life is always filled with happiness and peace. I love you all. Let me know what you think of this story in the comments below. Tap the number 1 if you enjoyed it. And do not forget to subscribe channel for more thrilling tales from the Wild West.